Would you?
Oh yeah, you guys are like the stalwarts. You were at the HIT class and now you're here for forecasting. So thank you for coming again. And exciting day to do forecasting. There's a storm outside. Accidentally somehow dropped this picture of a cookie into my Safari and do not know how to obviously when I was writing the newsletter, I do not know how to get it go away. So instead of checking the buoys right now, let's just look at this storm that is landing upon us. So let's see, it's coming across, right? So there's these two things that produce the swell from last week, and those have moved out. And then there's this, I don't know, they're making a big deal out of it on like Fox News and the Weather Channel, but like, because I was at the mechanics today, I saw Fox News, but it was just the weather kind of portion. And this is, they're making a big winter storm warning thing about this. So here it is off our coast, bringing up these southeast winds, already probably starting to produce swell right now. And then, this is basically that system that they're making a big deal of. On the weather channels. Let's see what's over, and the West Coast has been getting some crazy weather. There's snow at really low altitudes over there. I don't know if you guys have friends in California or been seeing some of the Instagrams from over there. Really cold winter. So by 4 a.m. here, there's this. So it looks like we have like a kind of combo of swells because this big system is still out there. And I think earlier today I saw on the buoys like a 13-second something or other. That might be from this out here because this is already looking to the future tomorrow. So around 7 a.m. the winds are going to have that east-northeast in them. And the storm is just really right off the coast. I kind of like these closer coastal systems. Pretty good size. Here's the eye of it. Diameter 10 a.m. starts to move off. And then by 1 p.m. it's moved off, and this is when the swells should really, now it's been in the water, not quite 24 hours. So that should start to make the swell bands come together. And it's a pretty big system if you look at the overall diameter of this. So we could get some pretty good size waves tomorrow afternoon. At least I hope we, yeah.
Question. So the system needs to like hang out or sort of be around in the water for a certain amount of time to produce enough that they'll come over to the.
Right. So that actually, I guess what I'm more explaining is that lag time. So we're not going to see. So let's see, 10 a.m. the storm's like on us, and you'll start to see the chops and the swell will start to like look bigger and more raw. But it could potentially grow in size as it moves off the coast because there's been more time for those swell bands to aggregate into cleaner lines, if that makes sense. They'll still be very close together because this was or is or will be a very close to shore for the most part swell event. And it's this pretty favorable direction. Honestly, it's gonna have this east-southeast direction to it.
That was my other question with the swell direction. Is it really just a case of like where that is geographically located from us? And then, so if that's to our southeast, it comes from the southeast, not like the wind direction, which is swirling around. It's just like where the storm is, that's where the swell direction's coming from.
Right. So if we look at the movement of this storm, so in its very infancy while we're sleeping, or even if we want to look like right now, honestly, the swell is starting. The swell is starting in a more deep southerly direction. And we have this also. So there are two swells in the water. There's this easterly swell, long period swell from this enormous system that is connected to two systems here, really. But so this whole, and these are connected up to this, but if we look at this huge, I mean, it's taking up the whole Atlantic Ocean, really. So that's a very big system. And because it's hanging out here and has done for some time, this is going to produce an easterly swell direction for us.
Mhm.
If these blobs were located a little further north, then it would be more east northeast or even northeast. And if they were located further south, it would have more straight east, more southeast, or east southeast, depending on where they're located.
Well, we
And
can't really get like northeast swell direction, right? Because of the direction of our coast.
we do this. It's very weird, but we get northeast better than we get east northeast.
Oh,
So
because it comes.
it wraps around. There's something in our bathymetry that hooks the northwest swell in.
Hmm.
And a lot of times when we're talking about a nor'easter, it's a swell that came from the northeast and situates down here. So it's a more easterly or southeasterly direction at the end of the day.
Uh-huh.
But an east northeast swell, which sits like here, those are the ones with that really weird angle. Where we get them, they might be bigger on the west end of Rockaways. And they're good in New Jersey because New Jersey has a more open swell direction to the east northeast.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You just need the west winds to coincide with that.
Is there, sorry, I have a lot of questions. Is there,
No, this stuff's confusing. It's no, ask away. It's better if you
is
ask.
there like for us at least, or kind of is there across the board generality, like that you want the swell is best if it's coming like head on, or always if it's like at a certain kind of angle, but not like too steep an angle to the direction of your coast?
So it's
like-
just gonna depend like location to location. And it will also depend if you're surfing a beach break on how your sandbars are set up that year. So the general rules of thumb for our area only is that Rockaway handles more swell directions better than most places. So something will break here. So southwest, which is a weird direction, east northeast, which is a weird direction. So all the weird directions for the New York, New Jersey area, like we'll get something because of the way that we're positioned. And then Montauk also will get something as well because it sticks so far out. Wind a little bit dicier out there. And then New Jersey, the steep south angle is not as good down there. Like it will break where so New Jersey with a steep southwest or south angle, the waves kind of go out to sea or like have very little power in them there, where like we'll get like an okay wave on a southwest or straight south direction. Where on an east northeast, Long Beach is sheltered from that. So Long Beach or an east swell, Long Beach will have like a wave that's also going out to sea and like a really bad rip current, where Rockaway can get quite good on an east swell. So because of this angle, just this little, and that's what we're talking about when we like really dig into the nuances of our local spot or some spot that we're going to go surf on a surf trip, is like really understanding the swell window for that, just that strip of land.
Yeah.
And our strip of land, regardless of your ability level, Juan has always said to me too, since I've known him, and as long as I've been surfing in New York, I've known Juan. He says also like the weird winds work better in Rockaway too. So Rockaway is a really like fortuitous place. Just it handles a lot of weird stuff. It's not going to be like maybe the best wave in the world, but it will be breaking or surfable when other places are really not handling weird swell directions. But if it's extra weird, it probably does have something to do with a funky swell direction. So the funkiest swell directions are southwest and east northeast. Those are the ones with the steepest angles. So southwest is like this, and east northeast is like from up here and has to kind of like wrap around, which is why it hits that western end maybe a little bigger than in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Yeah.
So in general, though, all of Long Island in New Jersey, when it's big, there aren't many sheltered places to run to. So what a beginning or intermediate surfer that doesn't want to surf big waves has to do is just wait out and watch out for the swell to drop. And usually like being very attentive to, because that could happen within a day. It could be flat the next day, as you know. So it might be an issue of just like checking again. Okay, I think, and it might not ever drop. It can go just big and then flat the next day. But I think this swell is going to have legs into Wednesday. So if we look right now, this is that wind. If, Annie and I are out in Rockaway, I just took out the trash.
A lot of wind.
It's windy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is going to whip up the local winds already. So for example, let's just toggle to the buoys right now because they'll be helpful. So we have 3.3 feet at 4 seconds from the east on, if we look here, that's this buoy down here in New Jersey. So that's going to be feeling some of this wind right away. And if we look on this retroactive data, this is helpful because we see that longer period I was talking about. So the buoy is going to alternately read the two different swells that are in the water. Here is the local wind swell that's whipping up from this wind, the 3 at 5, and the 3 at 13, 12, and 11 is from that larger thing that's out to sea that we're seeing. 44025 is reading it's reading that larger thing out to sea right now. And if we look retroactively, you even see 15 seconds. And that's from that bigger swell. That's not from the swell that anybody will be surfing. We'll be surfing part of this bigger swell tomorrow. There will be a combination of swells in the water, which can be good because when two swells are in the water from different directions, they can make like a very peaky wave. They can, not in all cases. So the buoys are reading, sometimes I'll have the icons. So the buoys are reading this right now. That's the long period on the buoys. These two, this big blob here, and then the short period on the buoys right now is this stuff whipping up right on the shore. So this doesn't have the time. The 4 seconds is the sign that this is just wind chop at the moment. We can't future predict the buoys. But what we see is this storm getting bigger as of 10 p.m. The winds are going to go to 29 miles per hour. And these are already starting to, we should see the interval rise by 10 p.m. If you check the buoys at 10 p.m., I would expect the wave height and the interval to rise just a little, not a lot. And then by 1 a.m., this thing has gotten quite big. So our storms, and this thing has just stayed out here. So this long period, there will be this reinforcing long period swell in the water tomorrow. Like I was saying, this is what we would call a combination swell event. So when you see these two large circles in the water off of the shore, and we're using our local shore because we're all living here and not on a surf trip right now, you would say, oh, that's going to be a combination swell. That's going to be interesting. I'm going to, if you check the surf, you would look for it. The weather's probably gonna be pretty nasty. You'll be checking the surf in the morning, so maybe after work. So now we see these winds getting upwards 33 miles an hour. And this is just still building the seas, and it's building the seas very close to shore. So even at this time, 1 in the morning, those are going to be very relatively short period. Now the seas have gotten bigger, 43 mile an hour winds. 36 mile an hour winds, and the system is starting to cohere and come together. So by 4 a.m., see the buoy should be rising quite a bit more. The storm is on the land, should be raining, maybe snowing, and now the system grew even bigger. The winds aren't getting much stronger, but by now it's 7 a.m. It's been in the ocean for 12 hours off of our coast. And so we should start to see there's that east-northeast flow really close to shore. 10 a.m., this is when it starts to move off, and it gets bigger. The overall diameter of this system, and look at this one out here. This is that one creating that long period, which could even some of these bands moving. So we want to imagine bands radiating off of these things. And this is another important nuance that you want to think about in swell generation, is that this is not uniform bands necessarily. You know, you could have one band kind of going off in that direction and one band kind of coming off in this direction and one band kind of coming off in this direction. You know, so as the swell is pulsing energy out from its center, and the center is always moving, and gravity and the earth is still spinning, there's all of these warping forces. So there's nothing like necessarily totally regular about any given swell, except for that most of the bands are coming from a general direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then in our case, we have the two swells. So this one's closer. It's gotten bigger by 10 a.m. 3 hours later, it moves.
Oh, I have a question. If
Yeah.
these two are both like east of us, approximately, like, but sort of in line with each other, does that mean that some of the bands might join
Merge.
together and then be one of the
Yeah,
higher ones?
that might happen.
Or is
Yeah.
that how that kind of thing can happen sometimes when there are two that might be
Yeah, I mean,
in line with
in
each
this
other?
case, I feel like this one is going to have a slightly more easterly direction than this one.
Yeah.
But it's totally possible that one of these swell bands could join up with a swell band from this swell and
Yeah.
be a large set for sure. It's just always interesting. I mean, I'm going to look out for that tomorrow for sure, because that's going to be a fascinating thing to see. Like, my suspicion is those waves will be closeouts. My suspicion is those waves wouldn't have very good shape, that they would basically overpower the sandbar, because you have, you know, this long period swells just suck here in general. This is also a good swell, you know, honestly, it's looking like a decent swell with this one behind it to go to, you know, if one had the time, which I don't, to go to Rhode Island. Because the coastline bends more there. So especially if you were looking for smaller sheltered waves, I would go to somewhere like Narragansett for sure. So the reason, again, to explain your first question, is that now that this has gotten bigger, it's been in the water over 12 hours now. By 1 p.m. it's been in the water for not quite 24 hours, but going on like 16, 18. And that has given, and now that it's moved off, it's given the swell bands a little more time to mature. And the storm itself has just gotten bigger. So by 4 p.m., now it's like much more organized. The eye is moved not that far off, and it's just a much bigger swell. And with this reinforcing long period behind it. So this, when you see a swell of this radius, look at how huge that thing is. Like, this is, be very careful, you know, like if you're thinking about going surfing, when you see, this is why I try, what I'm trying to teach to everybody when we do these forecasting models is just to like be able to look at a blob of this size, this close to our coast, and be like, oh, I want to go see how big that, you know, have the curiosity to be like, how big is that? Is it really going to be? But not the hubris to be like, oh, I'm definitely surfing. I saw in Magic Seaweed, it's going to be, you know, not that you guys are like that at all, but just to, when you see a storm of this radius, the other thought that could be in your head, this is the predicted model of Tuesday at 4 p.m. is this a one and done? Or are we getting leftovers from this thing? You know, that's a really good question to ask yourself. Are we going to get leftovers? And so far, just with the size of this going into 7 p.m., I'd say for sure there's leftovers off of this thing. Because then you have this, even though this is coming offshore, the overall swell was in the water large enough, I feel, that Wednesday, and it's still in the water at 1 a.m., that Wednesday still has waves. Yeah. Wednesday still has waves for the most part. And then Wednesday night, we start to see something else. And then this thing has moved away from like our swell window. And those two storms that we saw had merged now into one big storm in the Atlantic. And this might make some big waves for Portugal, very long period for them. And then this swell that we got, this is now Wednesday night, looks like it's gonna get sucked up into this system. And it looks like there's something here hitting the Pacific Northwest as well. So yeah, that's starting to get sucked up into this system. And then Wednesday night, we have another little system growing in a similar fashion, low pressure coming off of Carolina. And then Thursday, this is a smaller system so far. Here's that big one going back up to there. And gets a little, this system is, Thursdays, looks a lot. It's starting to grow, starting to get bigger, but see how it never organized or turned into as big of a blob as the one that's coming tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
And so that one's kind of disparate, kind of weak, not very circular, not very organized, but it's enough wind blowing over the water, 29 miles per hour. It will be interesting this week to see how the buoys stack up on throughout the day, Wednesday, and into the early morning Thursday, throughout the day, Thursday. That thing moves off a little bit on Thursday, but hangs, it's not moving fast off. Let's see what's happening with our storm. So yep, our storm that we had moved into this larger system. So like Nova Scotia or whatever this is, great, like just getting hammered. Probably still snows up there, unlike here. And then we see something else starting to grow here off of Florida again, Thursday night, Friday morning. This has moved off just a bit, but all of these systems are pretty slow moving in terms of how much they hang out. So Friday throughout the day, another very similar system starts to build. And, the Great Lakes are this storm looks bigger for this area, should be making a bigger deal of this storm than the one we're getting tomorrow, at least for the interior of the United States. This looks like a pretty big storm over the Great Lakes. And Kristen, one of the Kanata surfers that learned to surf in the Great Lakes, this is what they look for surfing the Great Lakes. They have some 41-mile-an-hour winds there. It's going to be firing. So Friday night looks like we're having more weather. And then a very similar system Friday to what is coming tomorrow. Saturday morning, looking raw until it similarly moves off the coast. This one just has a slightly different direction. Saturday, it looks like it's going to, be a little higher up, a little more east, and remain a little closer to the shore. But pretty similar kind of storm to the one that is coming tomorrow. And then Sunday, there might be leftovers from Saturday. Again, this is way out prediction. These storms can all move and change a little bit, but it definitely looks like by Sunday now we move back to the pattern of it blowing the waves out to sea again. So there should be plenty of windows within the up until Sunday that yeah, this is a bad pattern here going into next week. This is all the storms going the wrong way, right? They're being blown off. So none of these that happen after Sunday came up the coast in that same way. They're strong winds blowing the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm.
So right now the forecast is looking like and now, let's just check the local winds for the week, and we'll check the tides and see how Surfline did against us. So the wind is nasty in the early morning. Northeast is still not my favorite wind direction, to be honest with you. It can be okay, but the east in it tends to make it a little nasty still. And then it gets more northerly as it goes away, and then becomes very good in the afternoon. Just straight northwest, lighter winds. This bodes well for there continuing to be swell into the next day. The wind is getting less. So tomorrow is shaping up for some potentially pretty awesome surf And then Wednesday morning, it's pretty light winds really until midday. And honestly, the winds look pretty light on Wednesday. So it looks like multiple windows to surf, although there's more swell earlier in the morning. Thursday, pretty good winds all day. No wonder people are texting me about Thursday. Pretty good winds, and we saw that swell. A little strong, this is a little strong from the west-northwest here towards the end of the day. Friday, there's this northeast again, but in that storm that we saw. So Friday's a tricky one. Looks kind of gross, honestly. And then Saturday, the winds forecast has changed, which is good. It had a lot of west in it when I saw it earlier today, but yeah, Saturday's shaping up to be maybe an epic day of surfing in New York. And then Sunday, there could be some cool leftovers on Sunday here as well. Before these northwest, then you see the northwest, that pattern happen. And I'm just curious about next week. They don't have it that, it's not as hard as it looks on Windfinder. That's why it's good to check the local winds. Surfline. Yeah, so they're showing good waves. I think it's going to be bigger than Surfline is calling it.
I can't read their new
Their
layout.
new thing is very, very difficult to read. So tomorrow they're saying here we are tomorrow. Yeah, they have it not matching the top. Saturday, they're saying, yeah, it's very confusing now. But like this is our run of surf this week. Friday,
Right.
yeah, their wave heights are gonna be off. So we have to watch the buoys. Let's just look at the general tidal data. So we're going into that low middle morning tide, which is honestly pretty good. So for people that want to surf early on like Wednesday and Thursday, it's a nice mid tide before they go to work.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a nice tidal cycle. The Parent Patrol middle day, I would avoid the peak low tide and push that as far out as I could to like 11:30, 12, because the peak low is just, unless it's big and tubing and you can surf big and tubing waves, it really hasn't been that good. That's usually the case, honestly, for Rockaway. The low tides aren't good unless it's big and tubing. Otherwise, medium tide, I think, is best. So that is the forecast. Are there any other, you want me to go back to anything or explain anything more? They really did. Way to make it more confusing.
Yeah, so now the lower thing, it matches just it's just not aligned. That's what it's each row is independent, basically.
It hurts my eyes. It's like all over the place.
That's crazy.
Cool. Thanks so much. I'm going to sign off.
Yeah, just be careful. Don't go off these wave heights. I mean,
I don't, it's fine.
Yeah, you never do, Annie, but I'm just saying and I'm just saying this also because I'm making a Zoom recording and that there's more than just you guys here.
Yeah.
Is that look at how big the diameters of this is what I'm always if I could make this point again, I'm always looking at the diameters of these systems. That's good. Where was it? I'm always looking at the diameters of these systems and going historically. So what I do is I kind of log in my head, okay, this system of this diameter, I surfed and the buoys were X and it was this intense or this not intense or whatever. And a storm that's coming on, what is that, Thursday? Something like this makes the fun size waves. that fun size, where like the something like coming tomorrow can make some pretty larger size waves. So the surfline wave heights, magic seaweed wave heights can be really off when they're not like paying attention to the whole diameter of the system.
Yeah, so that affect like the overall size affects the like power of the power of it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And I'm not right just to like, I'm not right 100% of the time, but there are so many times by just looking at these systems and their diameters, and I get to the beach and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that's about right. And people are texting me like, I didn't think it was gonna be this big. And I'm like, why not? I don't understand why you didn't think it was gonna be this big. I mean, all night long, I've been looking at this system and it looked big. And I don't know what I think people like look, I think it's lazy to like look at the surf line and see 4 to 5 foot. And then they get to the beach, they all rush there because it's orange. And then it's like 8 to 10 feet. And then they're like, I didn't think it was going to be this big. And it's like, well, also you could have just checked the buoy. You don't even have to like, if you're doing it last minute, you don't even have to look at these. You can just look at the buoy. But anyway, if you live near the beach, you don't have to look at either. You can just look out your window, walk to the beach. But
I'm trying not to be lazy like that. That's why I'm here.
That's why you're here. Yeah, you're not lazy like that ever though. But
no, I look out the window.
Oh, well, I am writing this forecasting PDF so that I don't have to give the same spiel over and over again for future clients. And it is interesting that this would be like just a crazy experiment that you could like go native with your surf forecasting skills, which is like actually pay so much attention to your local area, to the seasonality, to the winds, and check every day and just like start compiling your own historical data and start noticing like signs in the clouds and things like that. And you could, if you really wanted to get into it, like do away with the technology for forecasting surf.
Well, I figure I might be other places occasionally, and then I won't have that same luxury.
No, I mean,
so that's what
I'm just saying that would be an option open to a person if they wanted to do that.
Yeah, totally.
I like using the apps personally, but if a person wanted to be a purist about it, they could just start looking for bird, when that bird with that beak flies over that tower. Yeah.
That's like some old surf movie stuff.
Yeah, totally. It is. Okay, so that's the end of forecasting. Is anybody saying?
Nice to see you guys.
Nice to see you, Annie. Take care.
Bye.
Did you guys get to read the magazines at all? You didn't, would you? Noelle did. All right, so we won't talk too long since not many. I might just try to see if people want to read these ones again.
Yeah.
But was there anything that like struck? I mean, I was like,
well, I think most of the world is more macho and outright just like vulgar than the US actually. So in some ways, at first I was shocked and I was like, I guess the US is particularly like honestly PC compared to like a lot of the rest of the world. So
I don't know. I didn't read it that way. I actually read it as the United States is more repressed. Like I actually.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's for sure true, I guess. Yes.
Yeah, I actually think there's something like really refreshing about the Australian magazines. I was like, wait, they're somehow better and worse at the same time? How?
I mean, I think repressed is probably right. It's like it's like the Puritan like descendant.
I feel like it's worse because I feel like the United States magazines are like always covering stuff up and like hiding things and like not showing things.
Yeah.
And like you may not want to see some of the things or hear some of the things that the Australians are saying and doing, but at least they're not like covering it.
Right. Yeah. No, that is pretty true. I mean, it was just, it was really funny to read right after the.
I mean, the irreverence they have like, I mean, it's interesting just to think about more and talk about more like their there's an ad promoting smoking.
Yeah. Like the coolest, whatever the like number, whatever coolest thing you could do. I actually looked at the choice. I was like, wait, is this like a sarcastic ad? Like, are they making fun of like teenage? And I was like, no, they're just making it look really cool.
Number 312 in a list of great things to do in your life.
Yeah.
But I also found like their representation of women like more across the board. Like it wasn't one, there was a larger display of women. I mean, they have the same old like TNA stuff, but I mean like in the advertisements. I thought in this Waves magazine, this photo feature on New Zealand was really cool, where it was just all these empty waves too. Like it feels like they have a lot more creative freedom.
That's interesting. That's true. I mean, yeah, I guess like the Hawaii girls one was like, I was like, okay, but I guess that's standard. Or
Yeah,
that's just like a more standard.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even their like bluntness with respect to the indigenous population, like that article that was like, yeah, we're like it's very blunt and very direct about how, and I know that's definitely like, especially for like the Aboriginal, like those issues, I mean, they are more just like at the forefront of like Australian consciousness, I feel like, or from what I've, but it's still striking to see that too in a surf magazine too.
Yeah, they are more aware of their cultural legacy. They're like clearly just more comfortable talking about they're clearly more comfortable talking about a lot of things. Also, there's their own brand of repression and macho going on for sure. Yeah, I'm kind of excited to speak a little bit more about it, but I think maybe I want to give other people a chance like to chime in. I feel like Roger would have some interesting things to say.
Yeah.
And I feel like there is actually so much to say about the cultural difference between Australian surfing and American surfing, and then and this weird crossover in Hawaii, which is really interesting to our sport. And there are historical tidbits in these two issues alone. There's stuff about surfboard design, like one of the I found really interesting was Dick Brewer has this really famous logo, which I'll share the screen next time and we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But I learned in this magazine that one of the women world champion surfers, Jericho Poplar, designed the Dick Brewer logo because she was also an artist, which is like some surf history that I didn't even know. And I think it also paired pretty well with what Dick Brewer was talking about the way that the surfing design influence was happening in Hawaii and who was talking to who, and like who decided to like pull the tail in here, and just like a lot of different design stories around the world of technology innovation. Is that like, you know, my dad thinks he invented the swallowtail, you know, and like somebody else thinks he invented the fish, and then but again, apparently like this guy saw some kneeboarders using the fish, and so I think lots of human creativity and invention, like it makes sense to a lot of people at the same time in disparate places, like what needs to be, you know, what kind of innovation needs to happen. And I think usually that conversation that humans have about like who did the first X, I always get wrapped up in this when I'm doing philosophy, because you know, I did ancient philosophy, and for the, you know, I always begin the forecasting class with this Thales and Anaximenes, and as I was writing the copy for it today, I found myself getting tripped up, or like, because the pre-Socratic philosophers are called the first philosophers, they're also the first scientists, and then that gets all roped into this Eurocentric, global North centric. Well, surely like the Chinese had technology, and everybody's been observing the tides, and it's like, yes, but there's a particular story about like why, like, let's just call them the first philosophers and move on. Let's not problematize that part.
Yeah.
Were other people asking philosophical questions everywhere in the world? Yes, of course, they're human beings.
Yeah.
Like, this is the first example of writing that we have that is explicitly trying to explain how things in the universe work vis-a-vis non like religious tropes. Although you can see parallels in other religious tropes.
Right.
It's really interesting. I just started reading Journey to the West. Have you heard of that? Have you heard of that, Wuju? Journey to the West? It's about this like magical monkey that is born out of a stone. It's this like great Chinese saga.
Oh,
And
wow.
and yeah, like according to this, and it's just so funny the way that different cultures think. So they have like 4 different land masses, and the land in the east is called the land of the superior body.
Nice.
And the land of the west is called the land of the cow worshippers, which is interesting.
Oh, whoa.
Or the land of the cattle something or other.
Yeah.
And that's maybe India, and
I was
maybe,
gonna say that's what comes to mind.
yeah, it's probably India. Because, but I don't know, the Chinese traveled so extensively, like at such an early time, that it's hard to know exactly what. And then the magical monkey comes from some island that seems like Hawaii, but not quite. But it is like this heavenly island in the middle of the sea, where there's like never-ending fruit. The monkey tribes there live on this like perfect raw fruit vegan diet. It's really funny. But they have things like 365 days and 24 hours in a day, and I don't know if that's partly the translation, but I don't know. It's just interesting that like there were also a lot of thinkers that like knew the Earth was round from an early time, but they had no way to verify like the shape. Like, we didn't really verify the shape until we went to outer space.
Right. We just like extrapolated the.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
we knew it was round before we went to outer space, but
Yeah.
then we went to outer space, and when we could start flying, we could really see like curvature better, measure the curvature better. But there were other phenomena that pointed towards the curvature way before we went to outer space. But yeah, I've gone a long way from Australia, but
What's the book title again?
it's called Journey to the West. I don't know what it's called in Chinese.
I want to see if there's translated.
I'm going to show you. Hold on.
No, that's cool. It looks like it's really famous. I had never heard of it. It's a cool
Cool.
cover.
It's
Oh,
just
that's
one
that's the whole
book.
box. It's the whole box set. Or
Oh, it's a set.
yeah,
Cool.
nice.
The magical monkey goes on all of these crazy journeys, and he meets with a pig, and like anyway, but I listened to a podcast on it, and this is one of these texts that all of these scholars of Chinese history and literature debate about the meaning, like what's the meaning of the stone that gives birth to the monkey, and what's the monkey's relationship to humankind. And yeah, here's there's a really interesting cosmology, which is in the arithmetic of the universe, 129,600 years make one cycle. Each cycle can be divided into 12 phases, the 12 branches. Each phase lasts 10,800 years. So it really has its own cosmology. At one, now within a single day, the positive begins at the time 1. At 2, the cock crows. At 3, it is not quite light. At 4, the sun rises. 5 is after breakfast. and at 6 one does business. 7 is when the sun reaches noon, and 8 is it slipping toward the west. 9 is late afternoon, sun sets at 10, 11 is dusk, and at 12 people settle down for the night. Yeah, all this stuff about
Wow.
the different, yeah, oh, here's the lands. This one is funny. Moved by Pangu's creation, the 3 emperors put the world in order, and the 5 rulers laid down the moral code. The world was then divided into 4 great continents: the eastern continent of the superior body, the western continent of the cattle gift, the southern continent of Jambu, and the northern continent of Kuru. This book deals only with the eastern continent of the superior body. Yeah. So it's just so funny the way that, like, wherever the humans are, they consider themselves the superior being.
This is a famous book. I just saw the translate in Korean. This is a famous book.
It's
I heard it, but I didn't read it.
Yeah, it's super famous.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of different scholars that, like, I just started reading it before bed because I'm trying to not watch TV before bed. And I did get it after listening to that podcast because I don't know, just there's like also a really funny like YouTube, like you can watch this like YouTube of Journey to there've been movies made of Journey to the West, and it's super duper 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 famous. Anyway, it's just interesting though, this whole thing of like the figuring out the seasons, figuring out like the winds and the climate changes and things like that, that all of the cultures have been doing throughout time. Yeah, they play a big role in human life, and definitely for us trying to figure out when the waves are breaking. You know, the climate change is very, very important.
Which is in the surfing magazine.
Right. Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. The one with the wetsuit. I mean, it has like the whole wetsuit thing, and that's really interesting too. That kind of like history of wetsuit technology. I mean, it's come a long way since there, but that map they have is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that was very cool.
I'm like, wow, we got to scan this map. I mean, this thing is really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. Like, I like all the tips. I mean, they have more tips than the
Like actual surfing.
yeah, and they
Yeah.
have like a lot of beginners writing in asking for advice. They also like publish the most inane like you're like, whoa, you put that, and then they try to have this like kind of punk rock edge, like they have that like little zine thing, and then in the other one they have that kind of like punk rock woman
Yeah.
being, I don't know what it's kind of silly or pokey with that pro surfer guy. And
Right.
you also see that kind of purism. The Gonad Man comic is very interesting.
Yeah.
Where they're poking fun at Americans and pro surfing, and Gonad Man's thing is this ethos of like not making a profit off of surfing, although Gonad Man's, there are lots of problems with that. I mean, there's lots of problems with Gonad Man.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and they call American, like they're just, it's SEPA like all the way, like that's not they don't say the word Americans, like barely.
No, we're septic tanks.
Yeah, which is pretty funny. I couldn't, because the design looked really similar to Surfer, and I didn't know if it was like, I actually don't know. I assume the American one came first, but I don't actually know. And then I was also trying to remember, because I was getting magazines shipped to me from the US when I was living in France, like in 94, 95, anything, so I was like, is that just how magazines looked at the time, or like that aesthetic? Or is it like there's something that they're trying to like emulate about like surf? Oh, like that is of the surf magazine aesthetic. I mean, it's maybe not the most interesting thing to people, but I thought it was.
I think Roger would know more.
Yeah.
Because he was already in
media
culture at that time. And
yeah.
I mean, I think basically you're probably right. I mean, that guy, David Carson, big graphic designer. I mean, he was
Yeah.
designing album covers for that album label 4AD.
Okay, yeah.
And actually it's interesting, you know, like you see them reviewing CDs in here.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like cultural overlap with the other, you know, I mean, and that's like also one of surfing's fuzzy areas where with this purism thing, where I don't know, goth culture, all of these little subcultures are like this though, where you want to have your special thing, but then you kind of get excited when your special thing is popular, but then you don't want your special thing to be popular.
Totally.
Like, and people are really upset about how much the rest of the world is intrigued by the thing that they do, and at the same time really proud, like, haha, like I'm a goth, I'm a surfer, like
Yeah.
I do this thing that you could only imagine doing, and you're just not brave enough to commit to this thing like I commit to it. And like, oh no. And so obviously if all these people are committing to it and it has all this allure, like of course it's going to be attractive to a lot of other people.
Yeah. But they're all posers, so.
Exactly. But then those are posers. And so figuring out like what is the real adherent of this thing versus the fake adherent. And, you know, I think it's also a really interesting, it's interesting for me existentially as a surfer, just this, you're not a surfer if you don't X, you know, so like whatever that X is, like,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of times it's like ride these big waves. Like it's just not true that if you don't ride big waves and you surf well in medium to small waves, that you're not a surfer.
Right.
Or
Right.
that you don't surf well. You don't surf up to somebody's standard of what is considered to be surfing well. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean you don't surf well, full stop.
Right.
Because like, I don't know, I look at, you know, and they are right. And historically, Hawaii is that place where you go to prove that you're somebody in surfing. Because if you can surf there, you can surf anywhere.
Right.
That it's totally true. But that like everybody should prove themselves that way or needs to prove themselves that way is a different point altogether.
Yeah.
But it does seem to be a consistent point across surfing culture.
It's like the name 3 songs of surfing, like, because you know, like when you wear like
Yeah.
a band t-shirt and people are like, are you really a fan? Name 3 songs.
Oh wow,
Like-
what a great analogy. It's a little different. It'd be like
Yeah.
name 3 songs and the 3 cities you've seen that band in.
Right. Yeah.
I think you'd have to press fandom like pretty far, but I mean the bare minimum would be name 3 songs.
Right. That's true. I mean, people do that to me because I don't, because there is like I don't look like somebody who's like Rage Against the Machine is was their favorite band when they were younger, you know? So like when I wear their shirts, people are like, really? And I mean, like strangers come up to me and I'll like really name 3 and I'm like, I just saw them in Madison Square Garden for their like whatever, but and I can name more than, you know, a few songs, but it's also interesting because it is like there's this stereotype of like not looking like, which I think applies to surfing is what I'm saying, is also the like.
Yeah, well, that's also the purpose of doing this and looking at these magazines with you guys too, which is like, now you've seen a bunch of surfers over and over again, at least from this period, right? You've seen Brad Gerlach, you've seen Sonny Garcia, you've seen Tom Carroll, you've seen Tom Curran, you've seen Lisa Anderson, you've seen Pauline Menser a lot. She was pretty big at this time. Who else have we seen? Luke Egan is all over these magazines, and you're seeing the crossovers of who is featured. Kelly Slater, obviously we already knew who Kelly Slater was because he's so big, but like Mark Occhilupo, who they call Aki, and like these should not, you know, like as people who are entering into surfing culture, like whether you like shortboarding or don't like shortboarding or feel oppressed by the big wave machoism, like it is important to know who Aki is.
Yeah.
You know, he is a legend of our sport, and Rob Machado and all these people that they are for the most part ripping shortboarders that got famous during this time of short, intense focus on shortboarding. But they have pushed the limits of like what is possible on a surfboard in terms of those criteria of speed, power, and flow. And they are all objectively beautiful surfers to watch surfing. Like we can all learn something by seeing where they take off on the wave, and maybe even being like, that's great that you take off there. And I can see that that's awesome, but I am not going to be doing that anytime soon. And then for me, because I was like really consuming surf media a lot at this time, it's just interesting, you know, Derek Ho is dead. Sonny Garcia's in a coma still. We're not seeing a lot of Andy Irons yet. He hasn't hit the scene quite yet. He's still in junior comps, but he's dead. One of these guys that hasn't been in any of these magazines, but is in some of the videos that they mentioned, Chris Davidson, is dead. And these guys are like only a little older than me.
And they all died in surf.
No, none of them died in surfing.
Oh, sorry.
I can only name like 3 that died in surfing.
Oh.
More die from drugs, you know, kind of like that story of the guy Cookie, who was this like raving, best surfing, drug addict, lunatic. And this is definitely a trope of our culture. But yeah, John Shamuka is dead. It's mostly drug overdoses.
I have an English question.
Mm-hmm.
Like if someone call you cookie, is like really bad?
Oh, kook. So
I
this
mean
guy,
cookie, Kooky.
yeah, kooky. So I have I'm gonna make a whole YouTube video about this, maybe a series. I am gonna make a series on my YouTube channel called "What is a Kook?" And I personally, barely anybody believes what I believe. So I will say what I believe. I think there's a difference between a beginner and a kook, but people call beginners kooks. So like there's this view that in surfing, we all start off as kooks, meaning we all start off as beginners. And by kooky in that way, it means like you can't control your surfboard very well. You know, let me think of some like classic kooky things to do. Put your wetsuit on backwards, put your wetsuit on inside out, try to paddle on top of your fins, put the wax on the bottom of your surfboard. Just like not be initiated into surfing culture. Put your leash around your neck. But then there are things that like, you know, what is kooky in one little tribe of surfing culture might be normal in another tribe of surfing culture. You know, so like in Europe, they all wear those changing ponchos. And like where I'm from in Northern California, nobody wears a changing poncho. That's like weird. You either just like take off all your clothes in the parking lot or you use a towel. And that's like everybody, all of the genders. And so like we would look at people like wusses who like use a changing poncho. So there's all kind, you know, some places like hate kneeboarders and all kneeboarders are kooks. It's like literally put in the blank of like, you just don't like that person for whatever reason, you're going to call them a kook. It's like the word basically doesn't have meaning anymore. It's used so much. And for me, I have a specific definition of what a kook is. And I think a kook is an overly aggressive, intermediate surfer with bad style. For me, that's a kook. And he's usually like very mansplaining, tells other people what to do, acts like a big guy, and like he doesn't surf very good. And for me, the hallmark of a true kook is that he calls everybody kooks. So usually the biggest kook uses the word negatively towards other people more than most people do, for me. But of course, that same person to that guy, he's going to call, like, these are the people that troll me on the internet. These are the people. I had some guy on my YouTube the other day, like, writing about how much of a kook I am and how bad I surf.
Really?
writing kook of the day, kook, like all this stuff. And I'm like, went to his channel. He had no videos and 2 subscribers. And I'm like, so great. You make yourself impossible to see your own surfing. And you just go on YouTube channels, searching for surfing hashtags and calling people kooks. Perfect. Like,
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, because I help people learn to surf, like I am always going to get called a kook by people who think, you know, along this purism strain, that you shouldn't get paid to teach surfing, or to promote surfing in any way, shape, or form, that it is pure when it's this group of guys that are gatekeepers and like hold the secrets, and maybe a few women that feel that way too. But yeah, that's my I have like very strong feelings about the word kook, and I honestly, it's ingrained in me when I get mad at somebody to call them a fucking kook under my breath. Like it's like a knee-jerk reaction, and I'm not very proud of it. I've been really trying to like cut it out because it's not helpful. Yeah, it's like I was just trained to do it though. It's just like since I was a little kid, I just heard the words fucking and kook over and over and over. Probably like 2 of the most common phrases I heard as a small child.
But kooky in regular non-surf English just means like kind of weird.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Weird. Yeah. Oh yeah. To be clear, it has another use to non-surfers, which is just you're kind of
Yeah.
like kooky. Yeah, it means like there's like, honestly, to be clinical about it, it is a word used for people who are probably somewhere on the autism spectrum
That's
or have like some type of psychological pathology. Yeah.
If someone call you like that, you should feel offended.
Not in that way. Like if somebody says, oh, you're kind of kooky, like funny, quirky, it's a very interesting word because it can mean different things in different contexts.
I've been called that, like not in a mean way. Not in a mean way.
Oh, okay, cool.
Outside of a surfing context, it's more neutral.
Yeah.
Mhm.
In a surfing context, it's not good. And some people, like the other guy that owns Locals, the Dark Mike, his Instagram is Kook Mike.
That's
And so what he's trying to do is because they create so many beginning surfers out of Locals, he's just trying to make fun of himself for like being a kook factory. And so what a lot of people in the surf education sphere will do, like my friend Chris, who coaches out in Montauk, he has a podcast called the Kook Cast. And it's a defense move to call yourself a kook before somebody else can call you a kook.
that longboarder with this. Is he related to Griffin Colapinto? Is it
Kook Pinto, yeah.
Yeah.
His cousin, yeah.
Yeah. Also has that, which I'm like,
Yeah, you'll see it a lot, and like at Locals Cafe, it says like
yeah.
kooks are welcome, or like they always have some like thing of. So what they're trying to do is to reappropriate the word positively, but it's used so negatively so much of the time in surfing. I don't see like. I personally I think I'm a kook in the more crazy kind of way. Like that's fine. I would accept that. Like I am kooky, like in that way. I am a nerd. But if you're using it to describe like how I surf, I just have like I know what my weaknesses in my surfing are, but like I'm not a kook. Like that's just wrong. Like it's factually wrong. And I feel that people that endeavor to try to like have respect for surfing culture, and even if like their techniques are kind of off, but they're willing to take advice and learn, to me, that's not kooky. Like, I just think that's what it looks like to be a beginner. And like, I don't know, like, I just don't think it's kooky. I think it's kooky when somebody's a beginner and they're like, you just saw them at a bar the night before talking about how they were surfing 50-foot waves. And then you go surfing and they can't paddle. And you're like, sensing a big gap here. And also, I mean, I'm going to end on this. And hopefully we can talk more about the specifics of the American versus Australian magazines next time, which is, it's important we're reading these magazines so we can see how visual the surfing, surfing is such this highly visual culture that among people that do it well, and especially those of us who were raised in the culture of the magazines, we have a standard that we don't believe that anybody can surf until we see photo or video. I will not believe anybody that I won't take advice from anybody. I will not even I'll be kind of nice and kind of talk about surfing with them. But unless I've seen them in a magazine or seen them surfing with my own eyes, because we have this crazy visual standard, I just won't believe, and you guys all are humble, none of my students ever tells anybody I'm a big surfer or whatever, you're like, I'm learning to surf. I really want to do it. Everybody's I love it. It gives me so much joy. I'm not that good at it yet. That to me, that is just an honest beginner. Yeah, that's the best way to be. Always humble about your ability levels. And then when you get better, you're like, I can do, you can say things for certain, I can do a cutback now. I can take off now. My paddling has gotten better. It's okay to celebrate those wins. That's great. It feels awesome to you're not scared anymore, would you? And Noelle learned to ride the whitewater better. And you're like, oh my gosh, this thing unlocked for me. That's great. It's a far cry from being I rip. It's so, or I only surf waves that are, anyway, it's all out there. There's so much out there. All right.
Actually,
so we'll try again next week. Looks like a maybe flatter forecast and some fun stuff to think about. So you guys get in touch if you want a session.
I might try to escape my seasonal depression to Mexico the week after.
Smart. Good call.
But then I'll be back after that. But yeah. I mean, I'll still be here when I get back, I guess. That's the only problem that I haven't cured. But
all right. Well, I'm sure I'll see Wuju soon at the clubhouse.
Yeah.
cool.
Bye.
Right.
See you
Bye,
all.
guys.
Bye.